Hey everybody, how's it going? Today I'm going to be installing a set of LumaStep M1 running boards from Boost Auto Parts on my 2022 Chevy Silverado LTD. The folks at Boost Auto Parts were nice enough to send me these to review and install, and these are a new product from Boost Auto Parts. It's a set of running boards, and they also have an LED along the sides. So here's the passenger side, and this strip here along the side of the running board is an LED strip, and it serves various functions. Turn signal, it's going to do running light. It'll also have a startup effect when you unlock your vehicle, so it'll kind of have like a animation. Here's a preview of the product page on the Boost Auto website. Here you can build your running boards custom to your specification with all the options that they offer. You can choose your cab configuration, the light functionality. You can add options like the startup sequence and the rock lighting function as well. There's also places where you can add harnesses or the plug and play adapters that you're going to see later in the video. Lastly, you can choose if you want the step pads on your running boards that come in several colors and several designs that are available. They also have an example of all of the light functionalities that they offer, as well as the startup sequences, and then also examples of the step pads and the colors that they offer. The installation is pretty straightforward as far as the running boards getting attached to the vehicle. They send the brackets, which you can see in the back there. There's 4 brackets for my crew cab. If you have a double cab, there's going to be 3 brackets, and there's locations that are already pre-threaded on the underside of the trucks to install the hardware directly to. There is going to be some wiring involved in these, so here's one of the close-up. There's a little control pack here on the front of the running board that'll be towards the front of the vehicle, and we'll get to all the wiring after I get these mounted. So the first thing I'm going to do is install the brackets and get the running boards mounted on the vehicle before I run any wiring or anything, so that I know exactly where I need to bring my wires to. So like I said, the brackets are pretty self-explanatory. They come with all the hardware you need. It's a 13mm bolt with a lock washer there and then a fender washer. You just bolt these to the underside of the truck. There's several locations on the underside of the truck, but you're only going to use 4. You're going to use the 1st, the 3rd, the 4th, and the 6th spot. That's where you're going to mount these brackets to. So here we are on the underside of the truck, and here's the first spot. This is on the very underside of the rocker panel, and then right above it, you can see that hole right there is the top one. And if you just go along the entire rocker panel, sorry, the sun is making this really annoying. So here's the 3rd set. This is where my old ones are mounted, so I'm using the exact same spots. Now, if you've never installed running boards, there's going to be little plastic covers here, like you can see one here. So that's the 2nd location. You need to be in the 1st, the 3rd, the 4th, and the 6th. There's 6 total locations, but like I said, you'll have these little plastic grommets in place on both spots just to keep water out. You just pop those out with a little flatted screwdriver or a knife, and these will pop out real easy. But we're going to install them here. You can see that hole up there. And it's a 13mm bolt, like I was showing you earlier, and they just thread right in. You don't need to put any special anything on them. They go in just like that. So I'm going to work on installing these brackets, and then we will get the running boards mounted to the brackets. So after you get all 4 of those installed, that's what it's going to look like. You're going to have 4 brackets sticking out of the side. And then one more step we're going to do is they provide a plastic cover that goes right here, and it mounts into these spots. And every single one of these will get that cover. So I'm going to pop those on now. So the covers they provide are just these guys right here, and they are going to go right into this slot like that. And the holes line up. And then we're going to use these little plastic pins to install them on. And they look like they have a threaded insert, but you just tap them in with a rubber mallet. So that's what those will look like when you pop them in. So I'm going to just go along and do all 4 of these on this side. So that's what those will look like after you install the little plastic cover. It's just a nice added piece of trim on there, so it's not just the metal bracket you're looking at through the running board when you get them installed. Alright, so now that we have the brackets mounted, we can install the running board to the brackets. And each running board has 2 slotted holes here. And then on the underside of these running boards, there is a track where we're going to install 2 T-bolts at each location. And these are what the T-bolts look like. And these slot in this track, and you can slide them to their appropriate position so that they fall into the holes on the bracket. So there's an opening here at the back where you just drop these in and then slide them. And you're going to put 4 on each side if you have a crew cab, and 3 on each side if you have a extended cab. It's just like that. We can adjust these obviously by sliding them. So we're just going to get them to their approximate locations now. Then we'll lift the running board and put it on top of the brackets. Then we can fine tune where these T-bolts land in the brackets and then mount them up with the lock washer, the fender washer, and the 10mm nut. So I've got the bracket here. I got my 2 bolts for the first set. I'm just gonna slot them over and pop them in. Then I'm gonna loosely install the hardware because we're probably gonna need to adjust it later. So I'm not gonna tighten these down all the way. Just gonna get them loosely started. So I have all the hardware loosely attached to the running boards. You can still adjust them before you tighten all the hardware down, either where you want to slide them forward a bit, slide them backwards. There is a little bit of play in and out against the vehicle, so totally personal preference on what you want to do. I'm going to push them as close to the truck as possible. I think I've already got it in that position. And then I'm going to sort of center it on the cab. All right, so I've got them mounted on both sides. Passenger side is the same as the driver's side as far as mounting. They look pretty good just by themselves without the lighting all hooked up yet. But that's what they look like from that angle. And like I said, I got the driver's side installed as well. And that's what those look like as well. So the next step is the wiring, and there's a couple harnesses and they will plug into the little control box that's right underneath the Boost Auto logo right there, and we will tie them into the factory turn signals in the engine bay here. And then we're also going to have to hook up to the battery as well to get power for these. So first, start by finding your harnesses that have the double plugs on one side. These are the ones that go into the actual running board controller itself, and there's 2. So there's this one here that's got another white plug and then also another black plug, and then there's this one has the 2 that go to the controller on the running board, and then it also has a fuse and a power and ground, and then another white connector like this. And then I think there's one more, yeah, and then there's a black connector. So the harness with the power connector and the fuse is the passenger side because that's where the battery is. So you're going to start by routing that harness, specifically routing this double back behind through the engine compartment and down to right behind here. And we're going to plug this in to the controller that's mounted right here. And the best way to do that is just to come down through the back here and keep it away from hot and moving parts and whatnot, and just fish it down the firewall until it pops out below the truck. Keep in mind you should disconnect your negative on your truck battery at this time because we're going to do some wiring and plugging and things like that with factory components. We don't want to have a short. So I'm going to start by fishing that wire down through back here somehow. You can see the ground is back there, so I'm going to fish it down somewheres here. It'll pop out below the truck and I'll plug it into the running board there. So I brought mine down and then I passed it over that body mount and I looped it over here along this factory harness, and I'm going to bring it down. I'm going to zip tie it and then bring it on this bracket, and then I'll route it to the controller over here on this side and zip tie it however I want to make it look nice. I have my wires coming into the back of the controller, and then I have them zip tied over to the side of this bracket here. You can see one of them in front of you right here. And then I zip tied it up the bracket, and it goes up the bracket and then loops, and it attaches to that factory harness. And it goes up past that factory body mount and then up into the engine bay. And then this is the other end of that harness coming up into the engine bay. We're just going to leave it kind of loosely kind of over here on this passenger side for the time being. Driver side harness similarly down through the firewall past the wheel well and attach it to the running board on this side. Alright, so here's how I have the driver side routed, plugged into the driver there, zip tied to this bracket, and then it goes up on this bracket and then behind the body mount there and then up into the engine compartment. So you can opt for this plug and play harness, which is pretty helpful. This will plug right in line with the back of the connector on your headlight. Then this little harness will go off to your running boards. So this is just an inline connector that you'll plug in line with the big connector on the back of your headlight. So it makes it nice and easy, no splicing necessary. I think the easiest way to get access to that connector is through the wheel well. And full disclosure, I have another harness here that's also attached to the backside of my headlight for Gen 5 DIY. So I've disconnected that harness in here, which this is the factory harness from GM. This is coming from the body control module. And then this connector on the bottom here is my Gen 5 DIY. I'm gonna install the Boost Auto in between here and here, and it'll just act as a pass-through and give me my output for the running board. So just full disclosure, this normally would be in the back side of your headlight. Just keep that in mind. And I think the best way, it's kind of tough on my truck. This connector, it's on the other side of this rubber grommet here, which is for the low beams. It's kind of tough to get to, but it is over there. You just have to undo this red locking tab and then push the tab here and then disconnect the wire. But like I said, I'm just gonna pass through right here to here. So that's what that's gonna look like. It's just gonna pass through that big connector. And then I can pass down that harness from the running board and connect it to that little connector. And then this little white one, we're gonna talk about later. So don't get ahead of yourself yet. But for now, I'm gonna pass down the connector for the running board right here and plug it in and do that on both sides. All right, so I've got my little pass-through harness attached to the running board harness behind the headlight, and then there's this other wire coming off of your driver's side harness for the running boards. You need to route it up through here, and then I'm gonna run it across the radiator here with my Gen 5 DIY wire, which is this guy right here. I've got spots where I'll run it all the way over to here, and then on the passenger side running board harness, there is a white plug somewhere near the battery connection, which I'll plug this into, and then eventually I will hook up these two positive and negative. All right, so I've got that wire running across the radiator to right about here, and then I've got it connected to the driver's side and the passenger side together with this white connector. And that just leaves our black wire and our red wire, which is what we need to hook up for power. And if you come to this fuse panel, there's usually a black cover right here. You can pop it off just by squeezing these tabs on either side. And then on the right side of that fuse panel, there's a 13mm bolt, which we can use to hook up our red wire and get power there. Here's a little tip. I went back and wrapped that bare red wire and the bare black wire with some Tech Flex. You can see the difference here. Here's what they provide, and then here's what I put on, just to give it a little extra protection. So that's running down here on the side to that spot with a 13mm. And then the black wire is gonna go, you can just route it back here, and there is a like nut right here. It's a 13mm. You can unscrew this and then put this right on the stud and then tighten it back on, and that'll be your ground. Now, I have one more harness that is optional. It's the rock light harness, and this allows you to manually turn these on from a switch inside of your cab to give you some rock lighting. So that's the next thing I'm going to work on. If you opted for the rock light function on your LumaSteps, there's going to be an additional harness that's included with your kit, and it is a switch that allows you to manually override the LEDs in the running boards to be a rock light, and it'll be a white light instead of the amber. This is the last thing I'm going to do on mine, so there's a switch that's got to get its way inside the cab. We can disconnect it from these leads here, and then we're also going to need to get power from the battery. We're going to use the same spot that we hooked up the other harness to, right by the fuse panel in the engine bay, so that's where this is going to go. And then there's two other leads that I've already added some Tech Flex to it because they came as bare white wires, as you can see here. These are going to install on that pass-through harness with that extra lead that is now just a butt connector on each headlight that I showed you earlier. So we'll just strip these back a little bit and then install them into the butt connector and crimp them in. To the right of the motor, there is a wiring harness with a grommet that has a little side space that you can use to pass wires through. I've got my harness removed of the switch, as you can see here, and I've got the two wires that were attached to the switch taped so that I can pass this coat hanger through this grommet right here, but that's what I'm going to use to get my wires into the cab. Here's the grommet on the inside of the cabin on the firewall up above the pedals. Once you have your wires in the cab, I ran them under the dash, underneath the center console here, to this blank panel on my truck, and I just used a unibit on the back side of this blank panel, hooked up the wires. I haven't popped it in yet because I want to make sure I got them hooked up right, but I know the red one goes in the middle prong of the switch, and I think the white goes in that bottom one like I have it, which would be corresponding to this O on the switch, but I want to double check before I pop this back into place. But anyways, so that's how I'm going to have my switch inside the cab. Now I'm going to move back into the engine bay and route all the wires to their correct spots. So I have the wires coming out of that grommet right there, and then I pass them behind the radiator reservoir, and I'm going to run them up along the support here, leaving one of the white leads at this driver's side headlight, and then running the other two, which is this lead here, this is for the power, and then the other white lead over here to the passenger side where we're going to hook it up later. And then here's the power lead. I'm running it all the way over here, and we're going to hook it up in the same spot on the underside of this fuse panel. There's a stud right here that has 12-volt power, so I'll pop this off and hook that up, and then I will show you how I'm going to hook up these two white leads on the headlight. Alright, so here's a look at my cleaned up wires. I've got them all zip tied nice and cleanly across the radiator support here. I've got my white lead that's ready to get hooked up in just a minute after I finish the power lead for the driver's side. I've got the white lead for the passenger side, and here's my power lead that I'm going to hook up right here on this 13mm stud, the same spot we hooked up the main wiring harness for the running boards. So now, if you remember earlier in the video when I hooked up this pass-through harness, there was this extra lead on the pass-through harness. Well, that's what we're going to install, this white wire on each headlight. We're going to strip this white wire down, install it into this butt connector, crimp it, and then use a little heat to solder this connector, or melt it rather. There is a lot of extra wire. You can just kind of ball it up and zip tie it out of the way. So that's what I'm going to work on now. Don't forget, use your heat gun or whatever you have to shrink this heat shrink on the butt connector. And then I'm just gonna spool this up and zip tie it together, and then there's plenty of room in here to find a spot for it. And then I'll seal back this with my T15 screws to close up the wheel well. Then the last step is rehooking up your negative battery cable with a 10mm socket. Just like that. And then you can test all your wires. Here are the final output shots. At the beginning, you'll see the startup animation, and then it transitions to just the normal running light. This is what you're gonna see when you're just driving down the road at night. They are very bright and they look pretty cool. You can see an orange glow from your peripheral vision when you're driving. Your truck will definitely stand out with these installed. Next, they'll transition to the turn signal. This is the sequential turn signal. I have the hazards running in this example. It will blink the right side for right turn signals and the left side for left turn signals when those are activated. Lastly, you'll see the rock light function here at the end. hand with a switch turned on inside of the cab. Keep in mind, the rock light override switch will override any other function of the steps, including the turn signals and hazards, until the rock light switch is turned off. That's it for today's video. Love it if you subscribe. Stay tuned for new videos. We'll see you next time. Later.